Thanks for tuning in to Witch Wednesdays with Steph for a chat about a new witchcraft topic every Wednesday morning. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and you are listening to episode 96, Samhain and Pagan Origins of Halloween, which I combined into one episode since they all tie together. And I have a special guest here today that you all know and love, and it's Tara. I know that everybody loves Tara. We've had a few Tara episodes in the last month and a half because this is Tara's season.
Yes,
she comes alive.
Season of me.
She is a Libra, so as you're listening to this, we just passed her birthday. But yeah, this is her season to come alive. So she's
it really is
episodes because these are all like her favorite topics that have come up.
This is my time.
Yeah, and Samhain is one of her favorite holidays, so it's
so much
here to chat. So we are going to go over what Samhain is, the sort of history and traditions, and then Tara is going to tell you the Wiccan side of things. And then as far as the pagan origins of Halloween is, we are going to talk about jack-o'-lanterns and trick-or-treating and costumes, because those aren't technically part of Samhain. But they have pagan origins that associate them with Halloween, which is, they're celebrated on the same day. So people think that Samhain and Halloween are the same thing, but they definitely, definitely not.
Guys.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that, but I do love Samhain like as a holiday, but it's not my favorite because I am so Halloween focused, like the secular side of this day, that I really just love the spooky like Halloween decorations and horror movies and all those things, which have nothing to do with Samhain. So
as far as like, you can celebrate with them anyway. I do.
Yeah, I do too. But that is why Yule is my favorite holiday, because I don't celebrate Christmas, but Yule is basically the same thing without baby Jesus. So I get to enjoy all of the, Yule festivities, Christmas festivities. But since Samhain is so different, I mostly focus on Halloween at this time of year. But we'll get into all of that. So starting with history and traditions. Tara and I did an episode last year in season 1 at this time, if you want to check it out. Yeah, that was all about correspondences and how to celebrate. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but if you want like the full in-depth episode that we did before, that is last season. So we're just going to go over some history and traditions for this one. Yep. So Samhain, as we talked about last year, which you can already tell by the title, is spelled Samhain. So
unless you're mean, you can't spell things out. So
a lot of people, new witches and old, sometimes pronounce this Samhain.
Yep, I do.
I see nothing wrong with that, because we've already talked about pronunciation in many episodes. But if you have only ever seen this word written down and you pronounce it Samhain, I'm not going to be mad at you.
Good, because I didn't.
It is a Gaelic word. We think it's pronounced Samhain or Samhain, but nobody can be 100% sure. And it either means end of summer or beginning of summer. We can't agree on that either, because in the Northern Hemisphere, celebrating this time, it is the end of summer, but it is technically the beginning of summer in the underworld. So there's no consensus on whether it means end of summer or beginning of summer. So
we also consider it the beginning of the year for the will of the year. So it's very confusing saying end, beginning, it's topsy-turvy.
Yeah, we have no idea, but it is a Gaelic festival. So it's one of the 4 greater sabbats in the Wiccan tradition, which Tara will talk about. That is one of those 4 Celtic fire festivals, and Tara loves the fire.
You guys, you can't see me, but Steph can, and I'm like so excited. I've got a big grin on my face. I love the fires.
Yeah, she loves the fire festivals.
Oh my gosh, guys.
Definitely one of her favorites. But this one is specifically marking the end of the harvest season. This is a 3rd harvest festival, if you've been paying attention.
I was telling Steph at the beginning, I always have to double check which harvest festival we're on, because I feel like they go on so long. You're like, wait, which harvest festival is this? I mean, this one's a big one. A lot of people know this one, but it's like, there's this harvest festival and this harvest festival and this harvest festival.
Yeah, we went from Lammas to Mabon to now Samhain, and they're all considered harvest festivals. So this is like the third and final harvest festival.
This is the big ending, guys.
Yeah, this begins winter and the darker half of the year. And it's considered, when we think about it as being November 1st, we don't think of there being anything left to harvest, which is really true. So this kind of marked, for the ancient Celts, it was believed that anything left in the fields after this day is for the fairy. So if you take it, you're going to be cursed. So anything that's left out there is fairy offerings. So you have to get everything in before this day. So that's why I guess it's considered also a harvest festival. And like I said, up here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's held on November 1st with celebrations beginning on October 31st.
At sunset.
Because, the Celtic day began and ended at sunset rather than what we think of it as, sunrise to sunset being a day. So that is why it is celebrated October 31st to November 1st. And opposite in the Southern Hemisphere, it is April 30th to May 1st, which is when Beltane is celebrated in the Northern Hemisphere. So
another great holiday, guys.
This is one that Southern Hemisphere witches have a lot of issue with. I get a lot of questions about that, of when to celebrate, because the traditions are so closely tied with Halloween, that even some Southern Hemisphere witches decide to celebrate Samhain on this day, just because like the rest of their community around them is celebrating Halloween, and it's so easy to like put out the decorations and sort of like feel within that community and in that spirit. So this is one that a lot of Southern Hemisphere witches celebrate in October anyway.
Well, and part of the harvest also, going back to that, is this is when it started getting cold in the Northern Hemisphere, even on the British Isles. So they would gather in flocks of grazing animals because they let them just roam free basically all summer, getting fat and sassy. And this is when they really needed to start finding their flock, as it were, to bring them closer to home for the winter so that they'd survive through the cold of winter. So that's part of the harvest as well.
Or to slaughter them and eat them.
Yes. Yes. They bring them in the house, cuddle them for warmth, and then kill and eat them. So,
which I talked about in last week's episode with Heather. She mentioned how bonfires, in the episode about bones, how the word bonfire comes from bone fire. That is from this time, throwing the bones of these animals into the fire. So you already learned about that one.
But the more you know.
Yay. So Samhain actually goes back pretty far. It is general consensus is that it has these Celtic pagan origins because there are Neolithic passage tombs in Ireland. We've talked about those before, that align with the sunrise at the time of Samhain. And they have tombs, we've talked about this with various holidays, that line up with the equinoxes. And when that sun is in a certain position at those times of years, it shines into these tombs to light them up. And they have ones that specifically in Ireland that are aligned with sunrise on Samhain. So it goes back pretty far. It's first mentioned in Irish literature in the 9th century. And this is one that's particularly associated with a lot of different events in Irish mythology. So lots of gatherings and feasts and burial mounds are mentioned in this early Irish literature, because it was seen as a time when portals were open to the underworld and you could see, and that's where we get this idea of the veil being the thinnest between the worlds, and that's why spirits can cross over, and you work with ancestors at this time. Goes back super far in literature.
Yeah, this is also why right now is such a good time to work with the Fae. If the harvest was all in, they would actually put out offerings of food for the Fae at this point, because the veil is so thin right now, or during this holiday. And so if there was nothing left in the field, they could leave something in the field for the Fae, but if there's nothing left, they'd harvested all already, which often they did. They'd actually put out part of the harvest for the Fae on this night.
Correct. And one also thing associated with the harvest, that this is something that Tara is currently studying, Druidry. So we mentioned that in the last episode that she was on, and tons of you were like, yes, Tara, come back and talk about Druidry. So we're definitely going to do that in 2022. She'll be back for a Druidry episode. But specifically during this time of year, after this sort of harvest work was all completed, all these people would join with Druid priests to light a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. And the wheel was considered a representation of the sun, and there were prayers involved, cattle were sacrificed, and then these celebrants would take the flame from this communal bonfire back to their home to relight their hearth fires, which is still a popular thing to do in Ireland today.
It's really about community and getting ready for winter. So you need your fire going.
Which this, idea of these Druid priests using a wheel to spark the fire led to what is still done today, which is lighting a wheel of hay on fire and rolling it down a hill.
So cool, guys. But
yeah, that's a very popular way to celebrate. I mean, I don't like if you're like
burn, baby, burn.
Yeah, if it's dry season where you are, like I don't highly recommend this, but they still do this. There's a lot of it's more of a European tradition, but there are still places that will light a wheel of hay on fire and then roll it down a hill, and they run down the hill with it. It's a lot of fun. If you look it up on YouTube, it's really fun to watch, but I would be terrified to participate in that. I think Tara would do it though.
I would totally do it. So some farming communities still do this. It's a lot rare in modern times, especially because of the risk of fire in the Midwest. It's been a drought for 10 years. But when I was younger, I remember doing this, just as part of a farming community, not as necessarily a Wiccan tradition. It was just, hey, we got extra hay, let's burn shit.
Sounds like a very Iowa thing to do.
It is. It really was.
There are some other associations with Samhain, some other traditions that pop up in literature. There's early texts that suggest it was mandatory celebration that was 3 days and 3 nights. Yep. And if you failed to participate, you would be punished by the gods, usually with illness or death. So there's one.
I was gonna say, this goes along with don't eat what's left in the fields or the fae will curse you. Basically, get with the program or you're in trouble.
Yeah. There was also a military aspect to it in Ireland, and holiday thrones were prepared for the soldiers' commanders, and anyone who committed a crime or used their weapons during the celebration faced a death sentence. So there is a lot of death associated with this, illness and death if you don't do things properly heading into the new year. So that's where this sort of really dark imagery comes from, associated with Samhain.
Well, and I think in modern times, the underworld is considered more a dark place. And I think that also kind of creeps into the conversation on, ooh, it's dark and scary. Whereas before, death is just part of life.
Yeah, this is when the dark fairies take over. So we had the deep dive on fairy episodes, and mentioned how in Celtic mythology there are, and Scottish actually, there are 2 types of fae. So there's, I will not remember the names, but there is the light fae that are the nicer fae that rule during the summer, and then the dark fae court takes over in these darker months, the Aoshi. So they are sort of the darker fairy that do more trickery and are a little bit nastier to work with. So those are the ones that sort of come through the veil at this time. So sort of a darker holiday.
Yeah.
And it is, of course, associated with All Saints Day, because the church, comes in and takes everything over and turns all of these pagan holidays into Christianized holidays because people were already celebrating, and people don't like to give up what they have done for years when converting to a new religion.
Yep.
So in order to get these pagans on board with Christianity, they sort of figured out ways to keep their ancient celebrations and their holidays, Samhain being one of them, which they shifted the date of All Saints' Day to November 1st. So that is, and November 2nd is All Souls' Day. So lots of associations with the dead there, but that is where those traditions come from, which then synchronized into the modern day Halloween.
Yeah.
In case you were wondering, and this goes back, many traditions have this at this time of year. I know that in Mexican traditions, Day of the Dead is extremely popular at this time of year. Lots of imagery about that you have probably seen around
everywhere.
Yeah, it's different than Samhain, different than Halloween. It is its own religious holiday. And that is one of my favorite Disney movies, Coco. I recommend.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
I did not think that I would like it because I'm kind of picky about Disney animated movies, and I'm mostly like a talking animal fan. So it's like doesn't have talking, like I'm not a big fan of the princess movies. Like if it doesn't have talking animals, like I'm not really into it. So I watch Coco on a whim. It's so good. It's one of my like all-time
It's really
favorites.
nice.
But it's
yeah, it's
really
well done.
that is a great look at the Day of the Dead and what they do in that tradition. So all of these things associated with this sort of veil being thin, a time to honor the dead and honor our ancestors, which is really what makes it different from Halloween. Halloween is a very secular holiday, like Thanksgiving. Yeah. There is no one religious association with it. That's just like kids celebrate it in school. Like it's just a very secular holiday, whereas Samhain is a very religious and spiritual day that's more about honoring the dead, honoring your ancestors, remembering them, contacting them, and not so much the trick-or-treating for candy and dressing up in costumes.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing wrong with celebrating both the secular and the religious aspects, but yeah, there's definitely a divide on, there are a lot of overlaps, but there's so many completely separate things for the secular versus these more traditional religious celebrations.
Yes, absolutely.
My favorite for the Day of the Dead is that after families have honored and fed the dead, they expect entertainment. So children are expected to basically perform, play games, also so that the dead can see the newest generations and all of that. I've always found that fascinating.
Yeah, I agree.
Your ancestors to the young. And
I agree. So in then Wiccan traditions, because gotten this before, the 8 sabbats as they are outlined and set up in the Wheel of the Year is distinctly Wiccan tradition. That is where it comes from. However, other pagans outside of Wiccan traditions do celebrate these holidays.
Generally,
they none of them, like the way they are set up in the 8 in the Wheel of the Year system is Wiccan. That was like put together by Gerald Gardner, but these holidays obviously are ancient. So some people who celebrate or follow a Celtic pagan path will only celebrate the 4 greater sabbats.
Yep.
And ignore the other 4. Some will pick and choose based on what they like best or what speaks to them. So any of that is fine, but we do want to talk about the Wiccan side of each of these in case you are following the Wiccan tradition, which is what Tara does. So I'm going to let her talk about the god and goddess and everything that's going on with them at this time.
So at this point in the Wheel of the Year, the cycle of life, the goddess is descending from the earth to the land of the dead, where she will see and mate with her beloved, the dying god. So she's already had the baby of summer and all of that. She's opening the door of the world for the dead, which is why the veil is so thin at this point. There are different rituals to honor her descent and honor the dead. We've talked a lot about the thin veil and honoring your dead and the ancestors. Especially the focus in traditional Wicca is on those who may have passed in that prior year. So in the Wiccan tradition, there's a lot of different specific paths. We've talked about that before. There's so many different types. There's traditional, and there's eclectic, and there's just a ton. So I won't go into all of those quite so much, but there's a lot. So depending on your path, this is just a very broad overview on where things are for Wiccans, but your specific path might have a slightly tweaked view or specific traditions that they follow. So again, this is just a very broad overview because there's a lot. But a lot of times, if you follow a Celtic tradition, this is the time when you might invoke Moraine. I believe, talked about her before. So this is one of the great fire festivals, which we've talked about. So a lot of times it starts with a bonfire and group stuff at sunset. And after the fire burns down, you go home and you celebrate kind of more privately with your family. It's, as we talked about, you talk to your family, both living and past. So your ancestors, if you're working with the Fae, put out a treat. Dudes, do it. Don't forget that part. It's important. But it's a lot of, this is the time to connect for Wiccans a lot of times with the darker aspects, maybe the misunderstood aspects of the god and goddess. It's not all rainbows and smiley, nor should it be. It's about balance in Wiccan. So it's a lot of recognizing that balance as the wheel is turning. So I hope that was helpful, not too droned on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't like to work with that crone energy, that
I would
it's just
do that
a little bit, because it's the unknown is scary.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
But obviously in the Wiccan tradition, everything, starts over again. The entire wheel is a circle, just keeps on rolling, and you can't have new life without death. So
yeah.
That's sort of like the balance there. And that's why we focus on ancestors and honoring the dead, just to make that less scary, to contact them, to remember them, and for our own sake, make it less scary for us.
Yeah.
The still living. So
hopefully, yes.
So before we get into the fun little pagan origins of jack-o'-lanterns and trick-or-treating and costumes, I wanted to just run through correspondences really quick. That was in our season 1 episode, lots of different correspondences. So
yes, there's a lot in the first one, guys.
Yeah, a lot longer, and a lot longer list of ways to celebrate. So to just go over them really quick to give you a reminder, the symbols of Samhain are pumpkins, cauldrons, brooms, black candles, and pomegranates, which is no surprise there. They're all the same as Halloween. The herbs and flowers are, the herbs and flowers are broom, mandrake, rosemary, sage, nutmeg, wormwood, and calendula. The foods are apples, pumpkins, cider, dark wine, pears, and root vegetables.
Yep.
The colors, again, no surprise, are black, orange, purple, silver, gold, and white.
In Halloween, guys.
Exactly. The crystals are anything black, so jet, onyx, obsidian, bloodstone, carnelian, and smoky quartz. The animals are the bat, cat, owl, and raven. And some of the deities, there are a lot of deities.
So many.
This changes, of course, based on your own tradition, and even, within traditions, some people have different associations with different gods and goddesses. You can have 10 people in the room who work with the Morrigan or Hecate, and all 10 of them will have completely different experiences and associations with them. So just because we say that these deities are associated with Samhain doesn't mean that they will work that way for you. So take that for what it is. So anyway,
as always, these are overarching, and your particular path may vary.
Yes. So the deities, of course, in the Wiccan tradition, it's the horned god. There's also Ishtar, Orsis, Loki, Persephone, and Dionysus. And I feel like Dionysus is just associated with every celebration because she's or
one,
Bacchus in Roman tradition.
One party.
Yeah, party. So some ways to celebrate. We already talked about having the dinner and a feast. It is called a dumb supper, but
People just say dump suppers.
yeah, I think a lot of terminology is moving over to say silent instead, because that's what it means. Dumb, they're saying silent, so it's completely in silence. Have like putting out a feast, you can have living people around the table, and you set a place for your ancestors and put whatever you're eating and drinking into that place setting, but then everyone eats in complete silence. So,
and don't eat their food.
Yes, never eat their food. Dispose of offerings the way that you normally do, but yes,
that's not for you.
But otherwise connecting with and honoring the dead at this time, which you can see across many different traditions. Obviously making a bonfire, which is Tara's favorite activity.
Always.
Dressing in costume, which we'll get into in a minute of where that tradition comes from, but dressing in costume, goes along with the Halloween tradition, but for Samhain specifically, people like to dress in a costume that's associated with the intentions that they're going to set for the new year. So this is considered the witch's new year. And it's a good time to sort of set goals and intentions the same way that a lot of people do on January 1st. So you set your intentions and figure out what, energy and things you're going to be doing in the next 12 months, and then pick a costume to wear that's sort of associated with that. Something that, if you are looking for more like peace and clarity, something associated with that. Whereas if you are looking for like confidence and power, a different costume associated with that, just to remind yourself throughout the day and bring those positive feelings and intentions into your new year. And then, of course, the last one is divination. Divination is super popular this time of year because it is easier to work with spirits or to ask your ancestors to help you. So tarot is very popular. Pendulums are very popular, whatever your favorite mode of divination is, the time to do this. And it's a good time specifically to see what's coming for the entire next 12 months.
Well, and there's, I don't think we talked about this last time, but there's like a specific tradition that I had forgotten about and then was reminded of, and I couldn't believe I forgot. But apple peel divination is popular this time of year, where you peel the apple and you let it float into water, and then it will give you the initial of the person you'll marry. I had forgotten that tradition, and I was really excited when I was told about it recently, and I was like, oh yeah, I haven't done that in years, and I think I might do it this year.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. That is a super popular one.
Yeah, it's a super popular, it's very easy to do, it's really fun, and then you have a delicious apple to eat after you're done peeling it.
And who would not enjoy that?
Right, I love apples.
So yeah, a lot of great ways to sort of celebrate and recognize the Samhain side of things as opposed to just the secular Halloween side of things. So if you are going to be doing any of these or want to share your other ideas of how you're going to be celebrating on this day, definitely head over to Discord. It's free. You can sign up for free and completely anonymous and chat with everybody from the community that's over there, that they are always sharing what they're going to be doing for sabbats. They share what their altars look like lots of good stuff happening over there. So if you want to join the community and chat about what it is you're going to be doing, you will have lots of people to connect with. So we are going to get into then some pagan origins of things that are associated specifically with Halloween, so you can kind of understand where they sort of come from.
Yep.
So let's start then with jack-o'-lanterns, because that's a creepy story. So
but a fun time.
Yeah, fun time. So jack-o'-lanterns are actually very popular, common, and they have come a long way. They used to be carved into turnips. And for many years, they were associated with keeping away fae and dark spirits. But the name jack-o'-lantern specifically comes from an Irish folktale about a man named Stingy Jack.
Yep.
And Stingy Jack,
Yep, old Jack.
According to the legend, Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him. But of course, true to his name, Stingy Jack didn't want to pay for his drink, so he convinced the devil to turn himself into a coin so that Jack could use the devil as that coin to buy their drinks. So once the devil did that, Jack decided to keep the money and put it into his pocket next to a silver cross. And the silver cross prevented the devil from changing back into his original form. So eventually, Jack freed the devil under the condition that he wouldn't bother Jack for 1 year, and that if Jack were to die, then he wouldn't claim his soul. So the next year,
it's always good to make a deal with someone you've already double-crossed, guys.
Yeah, right. So the next year, Jack tricked the devil again and convinced him to climb into a tree and pick a piece of fruit. While he was up there, Jack carved a sign of the cross into the tree so that the devil could not come back down until the devil promised Jack not to bother him for 10 more years. So when Jack died, as the legend says, God would not allow such an unsavory figure into heaven. And the devil, who was obviously still pissed off at Jack,
not happy,
but the devil always keeps his word. So the devil kept his word not to claim his soul and wouldn't allow him to come into hell. So he sent Jack off into the dark night with only a burning coal to light his way. And Jack put the coal into a carved out turnip and is said to have been roaming the earth ever since. And the Irish began to refer to this figure as Jack of the Lantern and then simply Jack-o'-lantern. So, that is where that creepy name comes from. That's why we call them jack-o'-lanterns. And in Ireland and Scotland, people began to make their own versions of Jack's lanterns by carving these scary faces into turnips or potatoes and then placing them in windows or near doors to frighten away Stingy Jack and other wandering evil spirits.
Yep.
And then immigrants, when they came over to the United States, brought this jack-o'-lantern tradition, but pumpkins are a fruit native to America. So they made a better jack-o'-lantern. So that's why we use pumpkins here.
Yes, you can use other things, but pumpkins are by far the easiest, guys, and they hold up pretty darn well.
Yeah, it's good. Turnips are difficult. Yeah. It's just harder to carve like a little face.
It's just harder to carve, yeah.
Yeah, onto a smaller, fruit or gourd. So pumpkins are just much easier. Not that they're that easy. I don't find pumpkin carving that easy. I'm not great at it. I'm not very artistic. So
I'm not either. Mine usually are pretty basic, but then I take all the pumpkin seeds and I eat the crap out of them after I bake them. Don't eat them raw, guys.
So into the ancient origins of trick-or-treating and costumes. So I say them together because they sort of go together for the reasons like people would dress up in costumes to get these sort of treats. So that is kind of why they go together. But the ancient Celts would originally dress up in various costumes, spooky ones. So as an animal or a monster.
Creatures, guys.
Yeah. In order to confuse any of the fairies that were going to come through the veil. So again, this time of fairies is more like trickster evil fairies. So they would want to, of course, leave those offerings to appease any of them, but also dress up in various costumes so that they would confuse them and not come after the humans. You were believed to be less likely to be kidnapped if you were dressed in those costumes. And
they'd also roam around villages to keep the spirits from going into the village. So they wouldn't actually go door to door. They just kind of roam around, making a lot of racket around the village.
Yes. And this was called mummers. Mumming
or souling.
Yeah, mummers. Yeah. So mummers, you will still see in some cities, but I know heavily in Pennsylvania, they have a Mummers Day parade on January 1st, which I only know because my friend Steph, who listens to this podcast and also has a blog at lifeaccordingtosteph.com, her husband is a mummer and they dress in these crazy elaborate costumes and go on parade on January 1st. And it's always so fun to see what they do.
This is actually what they call the people that are on the floats during Mardi Gras as well, mummers.
Mummers. Yes, this idea of dressing in these costumes.
And strange elaborate costumes and drawing attention away from people.
It goes back super far. So
yep, many traditions have this, but yes, they're called mummers.
Yeah. So there you go. But then in addition to that, of course, this idea of then going into trick-or-treating with these costumes, it, of course, is because of Christianity. So when Christianity then spread into this Celtic area, and they converted it over to All Souls Day and celebrating the dead, then those kind of, two melded together, they still had these bonfires and masquerades, but it changed then into the poor people of the villages would visit the houses of wealthier families and receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for a promise to pray for the souls of the homeowners' dead relatives. And
sometimes mostly the dead children.
Yes. And they would dress up in costumes to hide who they were, because they were part of this community, and it was taboo to sort of show that you were poor to your wealthy neighbors. So these communities were so small, they all knew each other, so they would dress up in costumes to hide who they were, but then still be able to go to these wealthier homes and get these soul cakes. So that sort of started this idea of going door to door. And then later the idea was taken up specifically by children, and children would go door to door and they would ask for food, money, drinks, all of those things. And then that eventually turned into what we think of as trick-or-treating.
So in a very specific area, Somerset in the British Isles, this was kind of interesting. So I'm not sure how it developed specifically, but they would actually ask for not only food and drink, but they'd ask for money for fireworks. And it was held on October 30th. And then all the children that got money for fireworks would set off the fireworks on the 31st of October. That would be a noisy night.
Yeah, right. And specifically the idea of where the trick part came from in trick-or-treating was from a tradition called guising. So this is from Scotland and Ireland, and it's spelled Guising. And that was, again, dressing up in costume and accepting offerings from various households. But rather than pledging to pray for the dead, they instead would sing a song, recite a poem, tell a joke, or otherwise perform some sort of trick before collecting their treat, which was fruit, nuts, coins, all of those things that they were collecting. So that's where this sort of trick idea comes from. So lots of fun.
I was gonna say, also traditionally, it was something that you could blame on the fairies. So pranks traditionally were things like taking the door off the hinges, soaping windows, deep picketing fences, which as someone who's put together a fence, that would be so hard to put back together. But anyway, so it was a lot of the pranks that were originally done were things that could be blamed on the fairies as well.
Specifically then moving into the United States, because blaming things on fairies is more common in Western Europe.
Yes,
so
very much so.
The, ancient British traditions, Celtic, Scottish, all those areas are more likely to believe in the Fae and blame things on the Fae, but not as much in the United States.
Nope.
So in the United States, it's obviously, the immigrants that revive these traditions in the US, but in true US fashion, we don't associate it with any sort of
take things over and we change them.
Yeah, we make them worse and remove any sort of religious aspects to it. So in the 1920s, it really turned into pranks becoming the Halloween activity of choice for young people.
Because they were fighting the power, fighting the man.
Of course. And it is believed that the Great Depression just made this problem worse. with this sort of Halloween mischief then becoming vandalism, physical assaults, violence. So these excessive pranks on Halloween led to the widespread adoption of community-based trick-or-treating in the 1930s. And then
it was to make it a safer time for children and families.
Yes, give them an outlet. But then, of course, this trend was abruptly ended with the outbreak of World War II because there was sugar rationing. So there were no treats to hand out. But then at the height of the post-war baby boom, trick-or-treating then came back with all of the other Halloween customs. And then, of course, baby boom, we get into, you know, the 70s and 80s and high times of, you know, wealth in the United States. So that's when there's no more sugar rationing. Candy companies totally capitalized on this, and then
of course they did.
Launched their national ad campaign specifically aimed at Halloween. So that is where all this candy comes from, because it's estimated that we spend $2.6 billion on candy on Halloween in America.
So this became wildly popular worldwide at the end of World War II because the US was so busy exporting our culture everywhere. Jeans became popular and Halloween traditions became popular. So if you go to European countries, most big cities in Europe now celebrate Halloween Americanized, which is children go door to door in apartments to get candy and they dress up in costumes and things of that nature, which I find amusing. So I'll get out.
Oh, yeah. Lots of American imperialism going on.
Yes, a lot of that happening. Mostly bad, but Halloween traditions I'm not mad about. So
no, we came up with some good stuff. I mean, I will take trick-or-treating and costumes any day.
Ditto.
But yeah, even with people who celebrate the super secular Halloween, like I do, like no judgment, because I totally do that. It often evolves into then November 1st and 2nd really being like the honoring your ancestors day. That's specifically when you're allowed, here in Chicago at least, allowed to redecorate the graves. So they have
that's nice.
Yeah, they have different, I can't remember the exact dates, but they have like a spring date and a fall date where you have to have everything off the graves by this date in the spring, because they come around and do the spring cleanup of the grounds and mowing the lawns and all those things and getting it all nice. And then you can put your decorations back out. And they also have a date in the fall, which is in early October, where you have to have everything off, because then they do the fall cleanup to, you know, get everything ready and seed the grass and get it all set for winter. And then on November 1st, you can come back out and put wintry decorations out. So those are the rules here. I don't know if it's that way everywhere, but it's interesting that it lines up with All Souls Day.
I was going to say, the rules are slightly different here in Iowa. But I think I've talked about this before. When my mom was growing up, it was traditional, not Wiccan or witchcraft, just as a community, where there were days in the spring and fall where you would go and have a picnic at the cemetery with your ancestors. So there's a long time tradition in this area of everyone going and just hanging out at the cemetery on some very specific days. And those do line up with the Wheel of the Year, ancestor holidays, when the veil is the thinnest. And it wasn't Christian based. It was completely secular around here, just as a farming community. They didn't really talk about the veil thinning or underworlds or anything of that nature. It was just the family would get together, bring a picnic basket, and hang out at the cemetery with their relatives.
I have seen that before.
Yep. My mom said she did it the whole time she was growing up until she went to college.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I feel like that would be kind of fun.
Right? I was like,
I really like cemeteries. I know some people are very uncomfortable in them. John's side of the family, his parents and sister and everything, they really don't ever visit the cemeteries. They really like feel uncomfortable there, but you know, me and my mom are like there all the time. Like we feel totally comfortable in cemeteries, and not even just the one where my dad is buried. Like I visit like lots of them. I can't even tell you. We do like, we call it graving. My mom says we're going graving today, and she brings decorations to put on like every family member's graves. We must visit like 7 cemeteries in a day. So
that's nice though.
Yeah, we're very comfortable there. I really like, you know, cemeteries. I feel like they're a peaceful spot. If you want to, you know, get into cemeteries and feel like you want to visit them and it feels uncomfortable for you, then I direct you back to, in the summer, I want to say, I had an episode on graveyards in witchcraft and how to approach them. And if you have that uncomfortable feeling, it might be because you've never left an offering. There is a guardian of cemeteries. Changes depending on your tradition of who you think that is, but usually if you're offering, then you sort of feel like they let you know that it's okay then to be in there, and makes you much more comfortable with the space. So highly recommend that too.
Yeah, I would agree. Some cemeteries are uncomfortable for me. Some are not. The ones where my relatives are buried, I've been to many times. We don't picnic with them currently, but mostly because it's a distance thing. None of them are near where I live. They're all in different parts of Iowa. So, but we visited them my whole childhood.
Yeah, I think when you have somebody buried there, it's a little more welcoming feeling, I think.
Well, and I think a lot of times when you go somewhere that you know someone's buried, you bring a gift for that person. And I think that helps with the cemetery guardian be more accepting of you. They know that you're there for a reason, not to steal or do anything bad to those they guard. Very true.
So those are all of the Samhain and Halloween pagan-y things that we wanted to talk about for this episode, because we definitely both love this holiday and love this
very much
time of year. So
my time, guys.
Her time. Mine too, because technically Halloween is Scorpio season, because we've moved out of Libra season. You Libras are over.
We're never over.
Yeah, over. We're Scorpio season now, baby. But yeah, I do all Halloween things on October 30th, 31st, because I think this year we're doing like sort of celebrating, you know, small again because COVID, on the 30th, and then trick-or-treating in my area will be on the 31st, which is a Sunday. So I will be like fully Halloween for the weekend, but then I will probably move over into Samhain type things on November 1st and 2nd. So that is my plan. I haven't figured out, I know that it's this weekend, but I haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to be doing yet. I will probably be in the kitchen. I mean, Tara's more of a kitchen witch than I am, but I feel like this is just a good time for treats. And I have recipes over on Patreon if you're interested, and I will be making the drinks that I posted on Patreon. That's definitely going to happen for Halloween. But yeah, I have treats on there and recipes for Samhain that I will probably be making some of those. And I usually do some sort of divination with tarot cards, but a lot of options. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing. We will see.
Well, I will be doing some divination for the coming year, and of course, a lot of baking, cooking, all of those kinds of things. I've got a couple of new books for recipes that are specifically witch recipes, so I'm pretty excited to break into those and start the year with some new magical items.
Oh, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Because witchcraft has become so popular, we've talked about in Unpopular Opinions that I'm so excited by all the new books, and there are specifically witch cookbooks now. And I may have gone and splurged on some of them, a few of them, a lot of them, whatever you want to say.
Everyone she could get her hands on?
Yeah, pretty much. So I'm trying to wait until the beginning of the year to break into the recipe section, but I've read a bunch of them, and I am planning on doing quite a bit for...
Oh, I totally love it.
I'm very excited.
But again, head over to Discord or Instagram, Witch Wednesdays Podcast, if you want to chat with us about what you are going to be doing, because we are always looking for new ideas. So
always, guys, it's so much fun. Traditions, but it's also fun to make new traditions, which is just trying something new.
It is, and it's like so hard to get together with people in person still. I mean, yeah. We talked about this in last year's episode, so it's absolutely crazy that we're still talking about this. But, there are lots of places still have various levels of restrictions. So it's hard to get together with people and, have any sort of coven-like interaction or interact with other witches like in person. So the fact that we can at least do it online and get ideas from each other is nice option. I don't know what we would have done years ago.
Yeah, without the online
it would be
very difficult.
Yeah,
I would agree.
But that is everything that we are going to share to wrap this episode up. So thank you for joining us, but not the last time that you are going to hear from Tara. She's actually going to be back again later on this year.
It was supposed to be a surprise.
Well, we already ruined it by saying that you're going to be in every element episode, and we have not done the water element or Earth. We haven't done Earth yet. Earth is the last one.
Well, then fine. It wasn't that big a surprise, but all right. Well, I will talk to everyone later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This podcast was made using the free platform Anchor. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Now you can even add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create, whether it's music analysis, your own radio show, or something the world's never heard before. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership, and it's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Need even more witchcraft? Subscribe to Patreon for exclusive bonus content 3 times a week and order Sabbat boxes and other supplies at witchwednesdays.com. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast.